Thank you, Jacob. Hello, everyone. Good to see you. Thank you for coming this afternoon. So good to see everyone's faces. So it is just a minute after noon, so we'll go ahead and get started, and then more people will just kind of trickle in as they arrive. So first and foremost, hello and welcome to Special Event Permitting and Insurance. Thank you for joining us here today. For those of you who might be new, my name is Mackenzie Malone, and I am the Events Director for Venture Portland, joined by the sensational Gabby Albano, Events Assistant, and together we make up the newest offering at Venture Portland, which is the Events Hub. So Gabby, if you want to give just a quick wave in the chat or in the video. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So my goal for the presentation today is to help demystify some of those trickier elements that come alongside with special event permitting and insurance. We are also joined today by special guest Allison Madsen from PBOT, which is PBOT's event coordinator, who will dive into more specifics about permitting. A few housekeeping notes just before we get started. If you have questions, which we encourage you to have, feel free to either use the raise your hand feature or just put it in the chat and we'll make sure to get to you. So thank you so much. Before we get going, I'm just kind of curious about how people feel about these topics. So by show of hands, and this is a good practice for your reaction hand raising, by show of hands, how many people feel really comfortable with event permitting and insurance? I'd love to kind of see that. And we'll just kind of go down the line. Let's see if anyone has their hand raised. Gabby kind of feels good about it. This is good. Liz Smith feels good. Thank you so much for that. And then how many people feel somewhere in the middle? You know, we're kind of, you know, we know a little bit about some things, maybe some things we might need help with, but somewhere in the middle. Some people, Bridget, good, Mary. This is great. This is just good to know where people lie. So perfect, Deborah, thank you. And then for the last group, and there's no shame in being in this last group because that's why we're here today. For the last group, what is permitting and insurance? This is a good place to be if you, yep, perfect. There's some folks who are in that category as well. So I'm so grateful you're here and we're hopefully gonna walk away with some new information. So this is great. My goal again is to just kind of demystify so you have the principles of permitting and insurance that you feel empowered to be able to have the confidence you need to put on your next event. So perfect. It's so good to see everyone. All right. So the icebreaker in the chat, what has been an event where you have needed insurance and or permitting? Some of our event host experts out there, I'd be curious to hear some of the events that you've kind of had to go through this process previously with. All right, the chat is already lighting up. Street fairs, vaccine clinics, St. John's Bazaar, yes, absolutely. Last Thursday in Alberta, great one. Yeah, so there's a lot of different folks who seem to have experience in this, which is important. And then we'll go ahead and move to the next question, interactive piece here is people supporting, yeah, St. John's. Wow, so many things. Beer garden, mixology madness. Wow, that sounds like a lot of fun, my goodness. Cool. Okay, so, you know, why have permitting and insurance? I'd love to kind of hear anything that folks have as far as why have it. You know, there is an importance to it, and would love to kind of hear from those event experts in the audience that I've heard or seen as far as why even have it. Does anyone know? Maybe not, and that's okay. Liability and accidents, yes, insurance, so important for that. And permitting as well, for that matter. Thank you. Yep, PBOT requires it. That's a good answer. Perfect. All right, excellent. So we'll go ahead and just move on. Oops, sorry, perfect. Okay. So the special events program permits all moving events on the streets and or sidewalks, such as runs, walks, marches, parades, bicycle rides. So that's something to keep in mind for this specific category of events. It also regulates special events to maximize the safety of street and sidewalk use for participants and the general public, while also protecting public safety and convenience while minimizing disruption to public services. And one thing to mention here is failure to obtain the permit, as we were talking about the importance of permitting in advance, could result from the Portland Police shutting it down, which is not something that we want. We want your events to succeed. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and give the Events Hub just a shameless plug here. And if you have any questions about this, and I know that some of these questions or some of these topics can be confusing or challenging, we'd want to empower you to reach out to the Events Hub, Gabby and myself, because we are dedicated to helping you put on your event. And so one thing I wanted to go over here real quick is to be able to review something really quickly that we have gone over in Events 101, but just something that I feel is really important to review, especially in preparation for actually applying for the special events permit. So this is kind of our events brief format, which if you answer all these questions, you'll easily be able to answer the questions on the actual application. So very quickly, we'll just go ahead and go through this. Oh, we're going back. Don't mean to go back, always going forward. Okay, just a quick review here. So event format, we're setting the stage here. After envisioning your audience, what style of event will this be? Will this be a run? Will this be a march? Will this be, whatever is going on in the street, like street fairs and what we've heard of? The date is really important. So what time of year will this event be happening in? Do you have the bandwidth during this time of year to put on your event? The time of the event, very important, of course. The location, and then your insurance and permitting, which is something we're talking about today. So things to be thinking about that will make your life easier when filling out the application. Oops. Activities and activations, what will be happening during your event, partners and sponsors, promotion and marketing, social media, obviously very important in that. Run of show, which goes over specifically what you'll be doing during your event. And then always thinking about too, something that we don't ultimately want to be thinking about, but something that's important is to be thinking about your backup plan and protection. So just again, really brief, as we've already gone over this in depth in our 101, but it's important to kind of be able to just remember, and again, it'll cause you less grief when filling out your application. As I mentioned before, we have a very special guest in the audience today from PBOT joining us this afternoon, Special Events Coordinator Allison Madsen. Before I turn it over to you, Allison, thank you again so much for being here today. We're so honored to have you in our presence and be able to share a little bit more about you and what you do in regards to permitting. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it along to you.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. As Mackenzie mentioned, I'm Allison Madsen. I am the Special Event Coordinator in the City of Portland. I've been in this role since 2008. So I've had a lot of experience working with businesses and neighborhood groups on putting on events and helping to coordinate the services that are required from the city to make those events happen and hopefully happen very successfully.
Perfect. Thank you, Allison.
So,
oh, pardon. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just pull up the actual event application that Allison is going to take just a few moments to go through here.
Great. So the application is really easy to locate. Portland.gov is the city's website. If you go to the search bar and type in apply for a special event permit, it's going to pop up right away. You'll get to the page that has all of the information, the forms, the administrative rules, the code, the insurance requirements, everything that you could possibly need to confuse you and get you started. So what Mackenzie's pulled up is the actual application, and it consists of 5 pages. Now, understand, please, that this application is something that we meant to try to capture as much detail as possible initially so that we know what path to take as we move forward. Now, this application is the same application that a community fun run would fill out, as the same as the bridge pedal. So there's a lot of questions and a lot of detail, and I don't ever expect it to be right the first time around. And if you have any questions as you look at it or prepare to fill it out, I am only a phone call or email away. So the first portion of the application, as you can see, it's about you. Who are you? What's your organization? Who's my main contact to deal with at your organization? And have you hired a company to help coordinate these services? Then tell me a little bit about your event. Is it, again, this is strictly for moving events. So you can see the categories are identified as moving events. There is a block for other, but hopefully we've captured it with the blocks that are available. Where do you want to do it? Do you want to do it on the sidewalk, in the street, combination, or are parks involved as well? What part of the city? There is a $25 application fee. Don't worry about filling that out at this point. And so then you're going to tell me about the event name, the date, the times you want to be, where you want to start, how many people you expect to attend, and then a little bit of a description about what the event is. Then we'll go on in a little more detail. Where are the streets? What streets do you want to use? Are you asking to fully close those streets or utilize them in a moving rolling closure? The time of that closure, if it's applicable, the nature of the event by the participants. And you can see here, do we need to take parking out because you're going to close down the street and have things happening in the street that cars are a hazard? Are you crossing a bridge? Are you on the max tracks? You know, all of these hopefully make sense, but anytime you have a question, you can contact me or leave it blank and we'll come back to it after I receive your initial. Some details. Is there alcohol required? Now, alcohol isn't part of my permit, but it does trigger me to talk to you about what requirements might be in place. Are items being sold? Again, same thing. There's other groups that oversee sales of items in the right of way. And these are just talking points for me to get you to the right people. Same with noise. Fundraising, we just like to know that. Recycling event, we'll talk about that. Recycling at your event, we'll talk about that a little later. Safety, security, and volunteers. Most any event that's in the street or on the sidewalk, you're going to want to have people. We can touch on that later. It's definitely graduates between requiring people and suggesting that you have people. Then we talk about public notification. We really recommend that you don't advertise your event until we have at least an initial, okay, this can work. Insurance information, here's the detail. It's also on the web page. And then we do ask you to check boxes and sign and date. The next page is also more information about conditions that may apply. Don't be scared by this. These are may, depending on the nature of your event. Some could apply, none could apply, all could apply. So, but just look it over and ask me questions if you have any, and I will tell you clearly any of those that are required. So then we go on to kind of an area that's mine. The last page is for you. A lot of locations have other entities or jurisdictions that permit, approve, allow uses, activities, etc. And this is just a little capture of some of those ones that can regularly play into it. So I've just provided you some contacts here to reach out if you need to speak to any of these folks about your activities. And then just some information on how to do some outreach to the public if you want to get attendance and make your event known. And of course, Mackenzie and the Events Hub is going to be probably far better at helping you do that outreach. So that's the application in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Allison. We appreciate that, especially when you say, you know, you make it sound like it's so easy in comparison to, you know, maybe some of this verbiage that's here. And that I think is really great to know that there may not be as many barriers as, you know, the application may seem. So that's really important and so wonderful that you're available to be able to help is really important. All right, I'm going to present again. All right, when to apply? The time is now. The time is right now, or as soon as you have all the information that you need in order to fill out the application, like the event type, date, size, route. Those are kind of the fundamentals, and then all the other specifics can be filled out later. So it's good to kind of get started on this process, especially as we're gearing up for spring and summer. The time is definitely now. And at least 30 days in advance. For larger events, more time is needed. And this is key. For returning annual events, applications must be submitted 9 months in advance. So those are things like the Portland Marathon, the Bridge Pedal, those larger scale events need to be able to reserve the space, etc., 9 months in advance. So just a couple months after they complete their event, they're already planning for the next one. All right, this is my wordiest slide, so bear with me here. High-level application process. This is very important. And something that Allison had mentioned previously is that it's welcomed to be able to reach out to her in advance, to be able to kind of walk through anything. So that's highly recommended, and she's there to help, I promise. So downloading the application that we just reviewed, completing that, sending it over to Allison with that $25 non-refundable fee. So again, just even more of a incentive to be able to reach out to Allison in advance, to be able to get all of your information solidified prior to paying that fee is probably in your best interest. Once received, the application will be reviewed for safety, feasibility, route, date requested, and the use of city resources. And then Allison makes recommendations for approval. So this is really a partnership with Allison that you're looking at, not something that you have to go at alone, which I think is really important. And modification of denial or denial of the event permit. And something to note is that it's not just Allison. There's a whole committee that's dedicated to approving events. Oh yes, we will post her contact information. Yes, sorry, just seeing the chat here. And then the permit, again, approved or denied by the special events committee. So again, not just Allison. And then if denied, it could be appealed to the bureau director and city council for further review. So something to keep in mind there. Although when talking to Allison recently, she was very kind in saying, you know, they do everything they can over at PBOT from turning that no into a yes. So they will work with you. It is not a dead-end street, which is really encouraging. And this is just the screenshot that Allison had shared as part of the application. So your event may require different permitting depending on what you're trying to do. And I certainly don't expect you to remember all of these pieces. It is also on the application as well as it will be in our follow-up materials. So something to know in that regard. A couple of additional permits that you might need that Allison was talking about briefly is noise being the #1 thing. When amplified music or public address is happening, or drums being used, which is mentioned on their website, a permit from the city's noise control office or sign off might be required. So that's kind of one of those additional permits. In addition, the Fire Bureau assembly permit may be required by them or a sign off. And then we've also talked just briefly about the OLCC, which is the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. And anytime that there's alcoholic beverages being served, you'll need to get a special permit from them. So something to keep in mind. Also, anytime food items that are prepared and or served on the property, you're going to need a sign off from the health department. So Multnomah County Health Department will be needed to be able to sign off on that. And then Allison had so generously talked about event recycling. And although the equipment borrowing program is no more, there are still guides available for setting up recycling at your event, but there are no longer city containers that will be available. So something to note that's important there. Having the right insurance ensures success. This is important to know. We'll go ahead and dive right in here. So there's this kind of creed is what I'm calling it off of PBOT's website that all event organizers agree to save the city, its agents, officials, and employees harmless from and against all damages to persons or property, all expenses and other liability that may result from the event. So you're responsible for being able to ensure that you have insurance. So we'll go ahead and talk about that here briefly, is that knowing your existing policy is very important. And sometimes your existing policy might actually already cover special events and or you just need an additional rider. So something that goes onto your insurance policy for the specific date. Oh, sorry, Allison.
No, what?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to say something. I apologize. But, you know, so a specific rider that might be helpful for you for your actual date of the event. And something to note too, that permitting and the venue will likely require a certificate of insurance. So proof that you have that insurance will be very important. Public liability and property damage is insurance that is a must from PBOT. I know that we talked about earlier how permitting is a must, but it's also equally important to have your insurance lined up and ready to go. Another type of insurance that you might likely need for your event is employee liability insurance. All right, we are cruising right through this. Thank you for all of you who had submitted questions in advance for Allison. We have about 7 questions that we have lined up here. So we'll go ahead and go through these, and then we certainly will have time. So any burning questions that you have for Allison and or the Events Hub, we'll be sure to go through those as well. So if you think of anything as we're going through these questions, we already have some questions in the chat. This is perfect. So we'll hold off on these couple of questions in the deck, and we will go ahead and go through the questions that were submitted previously. So Allison, are you ready?
I am.
Okay, fantastic. So how do I determine what permits I need?
That's a great question. I'm sure that sometimes the processes are kind of daunting. I will tell you that I'm always happy to field any questions and try to get you going the right direction. PBOT issues several different kinds of permits. I do the moving events. We have an incredibly talented group of people who do the events for the permits for stationary events. Those are the farmers markets, the community events, the block parties. During COVID, we've switched to our healthy blocks and our healthy business program. They've expedited hundreds upon hundreds of permits for people to be able to utilize the street in creative ways and create space for people to be safe. So PBOT is the right of way. So streets, sidewalks, that's us. If you were looking to utilize a park, you would contact Parks and Recreation. If you are having alcohol at your event, the OLCC and our liquor licensing office in the Office of Community and Civic Life partner to make those permits happen. Food permits are Multnomah County Health. They have a special event permit as well. Events in warehouses and non-occupancy buildings are the Fire Bureau, as well as they cover beer gardens and tented events and laser performances and fire shows. And there's so many that sometimes it's just easier if you have a basic idea of what you want to do. Give me a call and I will get you going, hopefully in the right direction on all the high points of the permits that you'll need.
Perfect. Thank you, Allison. And our next question is, as you kind of briefly touched on earlier, what is a rolling street closure?
Yeah, that's a good question too. When people are in the street, it has to be done in one of 2 ways, either a rolling street closure or a full street closure. A full street closure is what you think of when you think of the St. John's Parade or the Rose Festival Parade or 82nd Avenue of Roses, where all the streets are barricaded off, the parking is removed, there's volunteers holding the barricade positions to just monitor those. And the event happens inside that closure and it stays closed the entire time of the event. A rolling closure is, I like to think of it as a safety bubble, where Portland police officers, usually on motorcycles, but occasionally in cars, create a bubble around the group of people that are in the street. And that bubble moves along with the group, closing streets as they come to them and reopening as the group passes.
Excellent, thank you. And what are some public notification strategies and resources that you recommend?
You know, this program does, in some cases, require notification to the people that are affected by the event. Usually those events that close the street for more than 4 hours, we want to make sure that those folks know that the event is happening and have the ability to understand what and how they will be affected, and give them the ability to contact me if they don't want to talk to you about how it works for them. I get those calls occasionally. For the most part, shorter moving events that have very limited impact, I don't require any kind of notification. But as you all know, living in communities, it's always best to just get a little heads up and give people an opportunity to plan around any potential impact. It makes them feel good knowing it's happening, gives them an opportunity to participate if they hadn't already heard about it, and it gives them the ability to plan for maybe parking out of their driveway and on the side street because they know they'll have to leave during your event.
Perfect. And do you mind just sharing a little bit about good neighbor agreements?
You know, good neighbor agreements aren't my territory. That's going to be more something you talk about with our folks that do the stationary events.
Perfect. And that's actually a great segue. We have the folks from PBOT who are doing stationary events joining us for an events webinar in April. So that's something to look forward to. So this is all about the streets and, kind of what's happening, moving in the streets. But we will be having a secondary kind of part 2 of this webinar with a different group from PBOT talking about stationary events with those healthy business permits and all of those good elements. So something to look forward to in April. Our next question here is, when does event permitting start costing money aside from just the $25 application fee?
So the application fee is across the board to all applications that come in. And as Mackenzie mentioned about sending that in, I actually don't ask you to send that to me until I've seen your application, made sure it's actually an event that I'm going to be able to work with you on. I don't want to take your money unless we're actually going to move forward. And then I normally, especially now with COVID and everyone working remotely, will create an invoice and send that to you so that it can be paid electronically. Now, as far as our event structure, events that are on the sidewalk, that don't close streets, that don't utilize resources. So we're talking about fun runs and fundraising walks and neighborhood tours, or any of those things where people are on the sidewalk obeying the laws. There's no other fees associated with that. Bicycle rides, again, where people are in the street riding in the bike lanes or legally as they would any day they were out for a ride, no permit fees are associated. It's when we step up to those parade categories and the athletic event categories, and all of that information about what each type of event, how we describe it, and what type of things fit into those boxes is all on the website as well. But typically a neighborhood parade, pedestrian, less than a mile long is a small parade, $150 is the permit fee. A larger parade like the St. John's Parade, 82nd Avenue of Roses, those have a parade fee of $1,000. And then athletic events is a combination of fees, and it's probably easier to just look at how it's structured on the website. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer.
Perfect, thank you. And another question we received is what are event monitors, volunteers, and why is it important to have them?
So with events, again, when we do a closure where we put barricades up and we create that space for your event to happen, people don't always honor the barricades. So we don't deputize anyone, but we do ask that we have you provide a volunteer, 16 years or older, somebody who's able to stand with those barricades and just make sure that they don't walk away. And it provides just a little bit additional deterrent to anybody who thinks that they might be able to drive through it. Any of those times we have police patrolling to make sure that it's enforced, but those volunteers basically maintain the barricades and make sure they stay in place. Now, other volunteers that may be required or suggested are on a walking event. So perhaps you have a fun run where people are running on the sidewalks. It's challenging sometimes to keep people moving the same direction, especially when you get a gap in participants. People go the wrong way, especially when they're crossing streets or making turns. So having people on the course to make sure that where the route changes direction, or they need to be sure that they're crossing in a safe fashion, you would put a monitor or volunteer at that place.
Okay. The next question we have is, what are common reasons permits get denied?
You and I talked about this a little bit yesterday. The number of permits that have been denied in the many years I've been doing this can really be counted on one hand. We try to get to yes. We don't always have the ability to hit the mark on the moonshot for an amazing event from the get-go. We do have a very thorough modification process to try to make it work for everybody. But the biggest challenge we have right now is the ability of the city to provide resources. As we all know, Portland police staffing is at an all-time low. And these events, when we have police officers staffing them, they are not on duty. They are off duty. So they've already worked their on duty hours and any mandatory overtime that they've been required to do. And they're volunteering to come in so that they can be dedicated to the event and not called away should something happen in the city, an accident, a shooting, or some other emergent need. These officers are here and not called away. And as you can imagine, that pool and those hours are really, really limited. So the police have actually put a moratorium in place for athletic events. We try to make community event parades happen as whenever humanly possible. But denial is a big process, and we rarely ever get there.
That's really encouraging, very encouraging to hear. I love that you can only count on one hand how many denials you've had to give out to folks. So that's, especially given your tenure. So that's really encouraging and empowering. And I hope that other people feel the same way. Okay, another question that we have here before we go ahead and look to our chat, which has been kind of blowing up a little bit, is I've heard something called TULIP in regards to insurance. How does that work and how can it benefit me?
So TULIP is insurance. It's okay. So as an individual, you can have personal insurance, you can have business insurance, you can have indemnity through a higher organization. There's a lot of ways to gain insurance. But if those avenues aren't available, the city has coordinated through our risk management, the TULIP program, which allows people to go through this direct connection and get the insurance that would be required to rent a city venue, or for most moving events, be able to get that directly. It's not a requirement that you use TULIP, but if you're challenged getting that insurance, otherwise you can definitely get access to it through that program.
Perfect. Thank you. And again, thank you for all of you who had sent these questions in advance. It's helpful for us to be able to have those. And we have some questions in the chat that I'll go ahead and read aloud. From Sarah, we have, do you need a health department permit for food trucks?
You know, this one's not going to be my territory. I think all food trucks have health department requirements, but food trucks aren't usually part of a moving event. They may be part of a stationary event or part of a festival area on private property. And Multnomah County Health Department would definitely be the source to look to for those answers.
Perfect. Thank you. And then are parking lots covered by PBOT?
This one's a little back and forth. So the city does own the several smart park facilities, and I believe we have some surface lots, but overall, the answer would be no. Private parking lots adjacent to businesses are private property owned by whomever owns the lot. In that situation, there could be fire permits needed. There could be alcohol, noise, all of these other permits that I've talked about, but transportation would not need a permit for you to actively use a private parking lot.
Perfect, thank you. And then from Kim, what is the, and maybe this isn't something that you specifically know, but I'll ask it anyways, is what is the updated alcohol permitting process with the city or county, not the OLCC?
Well, the OLCC is the home of the process, and part of that requires that the city or county, if you're not in the city, to sign off on that form. Because of remote work, you do need to go to the Office of Community and Civic Life's website, and there is information about how to mail in those forms and the timeline required for them to complete them and get them sent back to you.
And from Tom, we have requirements, costs, and limits for tulip coverage.
Again, that's through our risk management. It's not something that I maintain or manage. It's just a resource that I can direct to. I'm happy to provide a link to that information to Mackenzie so that she can share that with the group.
Perfect. And from Gabby, for moving events, when do you need a permit from the fire department?
You know, it's very limited that you would need a permit from the fire department. Their permits are more about being inside a building or having tents or alcohol service beer gardens, to use the term. When you have combustion engines or propane tanks or those kind of things, they have a whole list of things that usually are more festival related or inside a facility like at the convention center or Moda Center.
Excellent. And then from Deborah, what kind of permits are needed for something like a sidewalk sale? Do businesses need to each get a permit to place items outside for a district-wide event day?
So a sidewalk sale, it's technically, it is not allowed by city code for you as a business to put your wares out on the sidewalk for sale on any given day. Selling from the right of way is pre-COVID was definitely not something that was allowed. Now, if there is a Mississippi Street Fair and the businesses on that street are bringing their wares out as part of the festival, no, your business is a business and you're registered with the city and you're doing your work, and no additional permit is needed for that. There are some people who don't have a business license who want to do sales, and the Revenue Bureau does have a temporary sales license, a temporary business license that can be issued for, I think it's $10 a day. And again, happy to direct people to that information if they have specific questions. But sidewalk sales as part of a community event or a street festival or fair, no additional permitting.
Excellent, thank you. So we've gone through all of our questions. Does anyone else, we certainly have time left today, went through things very quickly. Does anyone else have any questions that they'd like to ask, especially while we have our special guest with us here today? Okay, the question that we just got from Judy is a clarification question, it looks like. So are we able to close part of the sidewalk to host outdoor vaccine clinics, independent event, not part of Street Fair Festival?
I am going to say very likely yes, but that would be part of our healthy business program, that stationary closure, the same one that allows restaurants and businesses to utilize space on the sidewalk or in the street. So it would be something that you would want to contact the healthy business program for that permission. It's really simple and they expedite those permits very quickly.
Perfect. And then I think we briefly kind of went over this, but when should folks start working with you, Allison? Oh, wow, we're getting so many, so sorry. When should folks start working with you to make sure they can actually host their event?
I would say that as soon as you have the idea, call me. If you need city services, call me as soon as possible. If you're asking to utilize sidewalks or the street in a manner, again, a moving event that doesn't close the streets and allows other users to utilize the sidewalk or roadway, we can pretty much permit any event fairly quickly, under 30 days. But the more you need, the more time I need.
Makes complete sense. Thank you. And from Bridget, how about on using licensed and bonded security instead of the police for kind of that service?
Yeah, the challenge that we face is that Oregon law requires, or I should say not requires, but only allows certain people to do certain things in the right of way. And because of that, when we close streets for people to be in streets for moving events, it has to be Portland police officers, or there are other officers. The sheriff's office is allowed to do it as well, and Oregon State Police. They're allowed to do the controls to divert traffic and override the signals. Otherwise, we're doing closures that look like a construction zone where we're turning off signals, we're covering stop signs, barricades, certified flaggers, advance warning signs. It's really the only two options. We've been exploring this for years. Licensed and bonded security do not meet the threshold for control of the right of way.
Thank you. That's very helpful. We have still a little bit of time if there are any other questions that we'd like to ask while we have Allison on the line. All right. Any other burning questions? Otherwise, we might just end a little bit early. I think that everyone's questions are answered, it looks like. People have gone from that, oh, I don't know, to I feel a little bit more confident, which is great. So I hope you were able to take away some important information here today to, again, empower you to be able to put on your next event. Here, let me a couple more slides. We've already talked about questions. We do have another webinar coming back up next week with Gabby Albano and Jacob Falkenberg to talk about sponsorship and partnership. So we'd love to see you back here same time next week, March 16th from 12 to 1, and we hope to see you there. Thanks so much, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Allison. Bye.
Are you